As Philippa said, the title is around mental health experiences and support in female academy cricket. So this research was part of my master's dissertation, and it was done in 2022, so a little while ago now, but it's currently under peer review. So we're hoping to get this published as soon as we can, really, and then hopefully can have some practical changes made from it.
Yeah, so I'll take over around this bit. So I'm Dan. I'm a PhD student at Loughborough University in my second year. So I'm working around mental health within county cricket organisations and looking to build support mechanisms. And I've done work with the ECB within both the men's and the women's game. And we're part of so our supervisory team with Dr. Jamie Barker and Dr. Carolyn Plateau. And we're starting to build some research interest and some research mass around the kind of area of mental health and psychology within cricket as a whole. So we've done work around franchise cricket, so around the nomadic athlete, the Disability Premier League, alcohol, gambling. We're currently putting together a network around gambling in cricket. So if that's an area of interest, then please do feel free to reach out. But yeah, so that's a little bit about us, and I think one of the key kind of points before I let Becky speak about her novel and really interesting research is that we kind of come at research with quite a practical lens, so looking to make changes by working with ECB, PCA, to kind of feed back our research and make practical changes. So yeah, I'll pass back to Becky to speak about her work.
Thanks, Dan. We'll get straight onto this. So the context. So I thought it'd be really key to kind of give you a bit of an overview of the context of where I did this research. So kind of created a bit of an overview of the current women and girls performance pathway. So the professionalisation of women's domestic cricket led to the development of academies, as you can see in the pink in the centre of this diagram, and they're kind of there to precede the professional sides. They were introduced in 2016 and they were called regional development centres, which feels like a very long time ago because young 16-year-old me was kind of one of the first cohorts through this. And as we've gone on and the funding has grown and the importance of academies in the female game has kind of really grown, they've continually offered more sports science support, so more training, and basically earlier exposure to the demands of professional cricket. So I remember long gone are the days where we'd go for a Saturday up in Leeds at Headingley just for the day as like a cricket camp. You know, these girls who are in these academies now have training multiple times a week. They have S&C, they have all the kind of support that they'll be getting when they do if they become professional cricketers. So what this might look like next year heading into the new tier system, not sure. Hopefully it can only kind of get better in terms of the support that these girls are offered. So I guess this leads quite nicely onto why I chose to study female academy cricketers and the importance of understanding their mental health experiences. So firstly, as I said on the previous slide, there's way more exposure to the stresses and demands that may threaten mental health now in these academies. Dan's research that he did a little while ago really highlighted cricket as a sport of being an emotional roller coaster. So, you know, there's things like the individual nature of it, the performances are really open to scrutiny. And we've had quite a lot of high profile cricketers speaking out about their mental health experiences. So cricket as a sport is one of the reasons why I chose to look into female academy cricketer mental health. But on top of that, we also have the real specificities of the female academies. So at this age, it's really deemed as a critical time for athlete mental health support. Between the ages of around 17 and 21, there's research to suggest that for 50% of athletes, mental health problems can kind of become really prevalent at this age and kind of reoccur subsequently. So not only is it really important to understand mental health of cricketers, it's really important to understand at this level specifically and this age group. As well as that, we have this idea that good mental health is really important for transitions. So in order for these girls to successfully transition into the professional environment and further along the pathway to the England squads, good mental health can really support that. So on top of wanting to do right by these girls' experiences, I really do believe that understanding this kind of thing is super important for sort of the future of the pathway, and to really ensure England produces some good, strong professional domestic and international cricketers. So yeah, this kind of academy age really offers an opportunity for us to proactively support. So understanding it at this age is super important. And there was no existing research into the mental health of female cricketers at this developmental stage. I know Dan has now since done some research in the professional women's space, but in terms of trying to find effective support, it's really important that we look at the specific context. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of an overview as to why I chose to look at female academy cricketers. So just a little bit to touch on the research itself. So basically there's three main aims of this. It was to understand the experience of the spectrum of mental health, so including good, bad experiences, as well as sort of the more serious mental illness. So we kind of opened it up to a whole spectrum of experiences. And secondly, we wanted to understand what they perceive to support their mental health currently, and if there is any gaps in their current support, to sort of give them the space to offer suggestions for the future. And overall, that third bullet point on there is basically what Dan said on the second slide, is that we really wanted this to be quite practical, and would really hope that it can inform some considerations going forward. In terms of the methods, I conducted these online during the 2022 season. I interviewed 10 current academy cricketers across 4 of the 8 regions. So I tried to get a few different contexts in terms of different regions. But I also think put on here research positionality, because I think that's quite important to note. So in order to sort of mitigate the bias, so I have quite a few shared characteristics with some of these girls that I was interviewing. I engaged in quite a lot of reflexivity and use of critical friends. And I actually think, given my background in cricket and those shared characteristics, I think it really helped to not only access participants, but I think it really helped with the openness of the conversation and helped me to understand the data a little bit more. So that's kind of a background into why I did it and what I did. And I'll just move on to some findings, the interesting part. So overall, based on these sort of the 2 branches of what I sought to understand, the experiences and the support, it kind of emerged that there were 3 themes with 6 sub-themes. So I will take a bit of time to go through each of these. So the first theme, and probably the most novel and less seen in some of the research, was around being a female in elite cricket. And there was kind of 2 aspects to this that sort of impacted experiences and perceptions of support. So firstly, the players spoke a lot around the contraceptive pill and hormones, and how that really can have a negative impact on their emotions, and they often highlighted experiences of mental ill health based on this. And I think this theme really spoke to a lot of their understanding around mental health as well. So a lot of the girls spoke around mental health being about emotions, and this theme really shone through as being quite a specific theme for this group of cricketers. So some of the quotes, you can see I've put a quote on there, but some of the quotes were around poorer mental health experiences, and they kind of called themselves mental wrecks and things like this because of the contraceptive pill and the hormones. Quite strongly worded. And there was also a lot of language around being put on. So I've highlighted that in that quote there. So this whole idea of being put on the pill kind of suggests the lack of choice, a lack of knowledge, the potential side effects, which I thought was quite interesting. And I think this finding is really important because there's such a high prevalence of contraceptive pill use in athletes, given how they're so frequently recommended by doctors to help with menstrual cycle symptoms, which left unmanaged can impact performance. So I think that's kind of a reasoning for why this theme kind of came about. But on top of this whole idea of the pill and the hormones, a second sub-theme emerged within being a female. And that was to do with gender differences between male coaches and female cricketers. So this was more to do with how the gender impacted support. So the players spoke around how the gender differences between the male coaches and female athletes can kind of reduce their willingness to seek out support. But not only this, it also was increasing the coach hesitancy to offer their support, particularly around visible upset. So the quote on there, for example, is around an instance of visible upset, and the coach kind of says to the player, "If I see a girl crying, what do I do?" And a lot around this was also about how the players just kind of had a sense of he just doesn't get it, and whether that spoke to the experiences of being a female coming through a cricket pathway, the age differences as well were also kind of touched upon. But central to this was almost how could I expect him to get it if he doesn't know what it's like, in terms of the emotions and sort of the experiences that were specific to being female. And this is picked up on as being really important because coaches have really high contact with these athletes, and they're in a real strong position to either support or negatively impact mental health at this stage. And in psychology, we talk about this idea of co-regulation. So how players can lean on other people, athletes can lean on other people to sort of help them regulate their emotions. And if they can't get this from a coach, who else can they get that from? And just generally the overrepresentation of male coaches in women's sport and in women's cricket kind of just reinforce that this could be quite an important thing to understand how the gender affects mental health support in this context. So the next one was centered around identity. So with the first sub-theme, players spoke a lot around balance and external commitments. So at this stage, the players have lots of various commitments to juggle. One player spoke about being at crossroads time of life, and it kind of all these kind of commitments increase stress, and they noted experience of being pulled in different directions, which is kind of highlighted in this quote here. Lots going on was kind of central to this theme. And then on the flip side of that, within this idea of there's more to life than cricket, players often spoke to having a strong cricketer identity. So playing cricket is a big part of who they are, and this often grows as they go along the pathway. They have a lot of friendship groups in cricket, probably more prevalent now than when it was when the academies first started, because they're spending so much time together now. And there was comments such as, if I didn't have cricket, a big chunk of me would be missing, which when I heard that, I was a bit like, wow, that's quite a strong thing to say. And I guess how this idea of a really strong cricketer identity can impact mental health is what came out of the data was that these girls kind of struggled to separate cricket from other parts of their life. So they kind of have this idea where their self-worth and how favourably they view themselves as people is quite dependent.
Well, since you came in, yeah.
It's quite dependent on or if they've been selected for something, which was kind of highlighted in this quote here, where, you know, I feel like worth is a strong word, but that kind of thing is based on performance and selection. And this really spoke to this idea of I am a cricketer and how strongly that was felt by the girls. So yeah, that's kind of the second theme around there is more to life than cricket, I promise. And I wish I could have shouted that through the screen at some of these interviewees. So finally, the third theme was probably the most widely seen across different sports in the mental health literature. And this was around high performance expectations impacting on mental health. So firstly, these were kind of driven by the players themselves, where they were kind of self-imposed. There's a lot of criticism and pressure to perform that they kind of put on themselves. And this participant, from the quote that I put on here, kind of linked an experience of anorexia nervosa. So really sort of serious mental health and physical health implications of this sort of really player-driven high expectations. So a few of them spoke to being, you know, their own worst critic, and some of the expectations they had of themselves seemed really quite unrealistic. So, you know, if I got a fourfer, then I was so mad at myself because I didn't get a fifer, and almost this idea of nothing seems to quite be enough. And that seemed to have a real link to their experiences of mental health. And then finally, the second sub-theme within this high performance expectation theme was around environmentally shaped expectations. So almost that the environment they were in increased the expectations they had of themselves. And this was particularly around the athletic lifestyle behaviours. So as the professionalism of women's cricket has sort of grown, and that has filtered down into these academies, there's a lot more emphasis on, you know, being athletic, being fit, being strong. And they kind of, a lot of the players spoke to feeling sort of the comparison between each other, and really sort of having really high expectations based on their eating behaviours and their exercise behaviours as well. So this theme around high performance expectations wasn't just around going out there, scoring runs and taking wickets. It was more than that. It was around the whole sort of lifestyle and what they expected from themselves and what the academy expected of them. So that's kind of where we're up to with the results. And from these, we have a few recommendations. So the recommendations were based on what we could come to understand from their experiences and their perceptions of support. And they kind of fitted quite nicely into three different categories. So the first category in the recommendations was around education for staff and players. So driven by the sports psychologists collaborating with other specialists like doctors, eating disorder practitioners, from the data it really emerged that these players really needed to be educated on the potential biological, psychological and performance impacts of the contraceptive pill, so that they can kind of make more informed choices around their willingness to take that. And then secondly, in terms of education, we think it's really important from the data that these players and staff get educated on disordered eating and sensitive processes to body composition testing. So within that last theme around expectations, some of the stuff that came out was around, you know, the body composition testing and how that's done and how that kind of increases the expectations they have on themselves. So firstly, we have the education, and then on top of that, recommendations for best practice. So this is kind of what staff who are already in the environment could do. Either they were already doing and it was landing really well with the girls, or something that the girls kind of suggested could be helpful. And this was around having a whole person approach to player management. So showing interest in their lives outside of cricket, and within reason be flexible around the peak periods of exams. So that was kind of really shone through around, you know, I'm not, the girls who were saying one of the best things that staff could do for them was to kind of see that they were more than just a cricketer. And that really speaks to that second theme around identity, and how as staff can they really reinforce that there is more to life than cricket. And the secondly, within the best practice section, was around sports psychologists supporting the development of multiple identities. So we see this done quite a lot through social identity mapping, where players can sort of be helped to understand what kind of groups they're part of, and they can kind of be encouraged to seek out non-cricketing social groups as well. And then finally, resource access. So this kind of speaks to what could be brought into the environment. So what really shone through was this idea that having someone female to talk to, whether that be a senior female player or a female member of staff, was deemed really important. A couple of the players spoke about a mentor system that they have in place where sort of each academy player is assigned a senior player as a mentor, and it was viewed as kind of a way of they've been through what I'm going through, so I can sort of reach out, and whether that's cricket, whether that's life generally, they can kind of be an extra level of support. And then secondly, I think one thing that came around the identity section was around balancing external commitments. So a trained performance lifestyle advisor could be brought in to help sort of offer practical support in balancing these commitments and time management. And this has actually been seen in some research as being beneficial to the well-being in boys' cricket pathways. So I think that seems like something that could be really helpful for these girls as well. So yeah, that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. Sorry if I rushed a little bit. But yeah, I'm happy to take any questions. Myself and Dan are happy to take any questions, or please feel free to reach out as well.
Thank you, Becky. I'm just going to stop the recording